Honda have jumped back into the touring sector with the NT1100, and in this video we'll take a look at what the bike offers to prospective buyers. To start with, Honda decided to utilise the 1084cc motor that was first seen in the Africa Twin CRF 1100, and that's no bad thing. It's a cracking engine, and in the tune for the NT1100 it puts out 100 horsepower at 7,500 revs and 104 newton meters of torque at 6,250 revs. Personally, I'm quite surprised they didn't go with the four-cylinder engine found in the CB1000, for example. It's a nice, peachy, smooth ride, and it's the sort of motor you'd probably expect to go into a tourer stroke sports tourer. But it does seem that Honda are going to utilise this parallel twin motor in quite a few bikes. We've seen it in the Africa Twin, it's in the NT1100, the CMX 1100 Rebel has the same engine, and there also appears to be a few new models coming through where they're using the same motor as well. So I guess it makes sense for Honda to build a number of bikes around the same motor or the same platform. I do have to admit that I am a big fan of this motor, having spent quite some time riding the Africa Twin. It's got character and it offers some enthusiastic performance. Some people will wrinkle their nose that it is only a peak of 100 horsepower, but for me that's plenty enough on the road, and I've never found riding this bike that I need any more. Styling is always going to be divisive for any bike, and of course it's completely subjective. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm not sure it would be fair to call it conservative styling, but to be honest I'm pretty neutral on it. When I look at it, it doesn't make my pulse race, but by the same token it doesn't make me want to vomit either. I think it's a classy looking bike and a very functional looking bike. Not only does it take the engine from the Africa Twin, but also the double display panels, handlebar control units, frame, and quite a few other bits smattered around. It might seem a little bit derogatory to call it a parts bin special. I don't mean to be mean when I say that, but that is exactly what it is. But again, that's no bad thing when you consider where those parts have come from. It's essentially a squished Africa Twin with lower suspension and a 17-inch front wheel. Now that equates in practice to a fine handling touring bike with a strong engine, plenty of comfort and plenty of luggage space. And that's where I think Honda have hit their nail on the head with the NT1100. In its standard manual form, the bike retails at £12,399, but at that price you get integrated luggage, a centre stand, heated grips and cruise control, and more often than not those are optional extras on other bikes. The luggage is roomy with 33 and 32 litre capacities, the right side being slightly smaller to accommodate the exhaust. They also come with internal storage bags as standard, which is a really nice touch. Sadly you can't fit a helmet in the panniers, but they do offer plenty of room for most touring needs. They also clip off and on, quickly leaving behind a more svelte looking machine. This particular bike has got the DCT gearbox, and that will cost you an extra £1,000 on top of the basic bike price, bringing this in at £13,399. Now, I am a big fan of the DCT gearbox, so for me that extra spend is worth it for the added relaxation that it brings, not only on town riding but also when you're pushing it through some twisty mountain roads. This is a great piece of kit to have. But in this review, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the DCT box because I've covered that at length in my Africa Twin review. So I'll leave a link in the top of the screen if you want to go away and find out more about the DCT system. One key talking point that I see come up about this bike from touring riders is the fact that it is chain driven and not shaft driven. Now, of course, I understand that people that ride touring bikes and travel big distances will bemoan the fact that this doesn't have a shaft drive, and I guess from Honda's point of view they were looking to keep costs down as well as weight. This is, however, one thing that will possibly turn quite a few potential buyers away from the NT1100. So that's probably enough tech talk for now, but how does the NT1100 stack up where it matters out on the road? So we've gone through a lot of the key numbers and the features of the bike, and obviously if I'm going to be talking about comfort and performance, it kind of makes sense to do that motovlog style on the bike. So let's start with the comfort and ergonomics, and as you would expect from a bike that's designed to munch miles as a touring bike, Honda have got it spot on. We've got nice wide bars but not too wide, noticeably a little bit narrower than those on the Africa Twin, but they're at a nice height, swept back close to you, so you haven't got a big reach. I'm not going to go through the controls because we've kind of covered those off on the Africa Twin, and I'll leave a link up there to my Africa Twin videos, which goes through all of this. It's exactly the same layout, exactly the same setup. A lot of people say that these are probably the most complicated hand controls on the marketplace. Yes, when you look at that, there's a hell of a lot going on in terms of buttons, but actually once you've been using it for a little while, it becomes second nature. But having said that, I've been riding the Africa Twin for quite some time, so I have had time to get used to it. As with the Africa Twin, we've got the same display with the small digital one at the bottom and the TFT screen at the top. I am a big fan of this display. It's not trying to do anything too fancy. It's nice and clear. There are 5 different riding modes, but again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that section of it because it is the same as the Africa Twin. But back to the ergonomics. So the handle controls are good. Up front we've got the USB port that you use to plug in any phone chargers or stuff like that you want to use. It's also where you'd need to connect your lead if you want to use the Apple CarPlay or the Android Auto. There's a 12-volt cigarette plug supply on the left hand side, which is nice to see. That wasn't standard on the Africa Twin, but you would expect that to be here. The screen itself, I think, is really good from a wind deflection point of view. It's nice and broad and wide. It's just where I think some other adventure bikes maybe struggle where they have too skinny a screen, but this wide screen does seem to deflect a lot of the air away. And you've also got these other little deflectors down here, which I must say do a really good job. The bike doesn't come with hand guards, but these offer just enough kind of deflection to move that wind around the hands. So on a couple of the colder mornings when I've been out riding, I've not felt the need to put the heated grips on because I'm not getting a cold blast of air. I do have a negative about those, and you might be able to see that, but because the Honda runs with orange DRLs, so the indicators are permanently illuminated, I can see that in both of those shields. At night they glow orange. So again, a little niggle, but it's a little bit of a distraction that's there. I don't like those orange running lights particularly, and this is another reason for me to dislike them. If you can paint these black or grey or something, put some film on them, that would stop that. So not a showstopper, but it's just one of those annoying little things. Or having the ability to turn this kind of running light off would be good. Now back to the screen. I talked about this being nice and wide, good deflection. I'm not getting much buffeting, or any buffeting really, with it at its lowest point, and it does move up quite high. The problem is you've got to do what I just did and get off the bike, come around to the front, grab it with 2 hands, squeeze it in and move it up. You can't do it whilst you're riding. I thought you might be able to grab this and yank it, but it doesn't happen. Actually, I'll put it up in the high position so you can give an impression. But if you're going from back roads like this onto motorway, or it starts to rain and you want to get more coverage, you've got to get off. You've got to stop and get off and put that up. Now when it is up at its highest level, as you can see, you've got a really nice element of protection. You've still got these flaps down here to do their job, but now you've got a big high touring screen. It keeps the rain off. I'm sat in a little bubble here. I've got no wind noise, I've got nothing hitting me. It is good. There's just that manual element. Well, not even the fact that it's manual, it's just that you have to get off the bike to do it really, or stop completely and lean over and try to struggle with it. It looks like it's the same mount as the Goldwing at the front, so potentially I'm guessing there might be a more premium version of this bike that has an electronically adjustable screen. But as it is, this screen works well, really big, good coverage, and obviously you don't have to have it all the way up, all the way down. You can stop it at various stages in between. Enough on the screen. It does its job well. Just adjusting it is a bit of a pain in the bum. The seat itself is nice and broad and well padded, although I do have to admit it's not as comfortable as I was expecting it. I think it might be because I'm quite close to the tank, so I'm sat on the narrow section at the front. If I scooch myself back a little bit, I've got a much broader platform, and it's a bit more supportive sort of further up on the coccyx. I'm not going to say it's an uncomfortable seat. It's not an uncomfortable seat, it's just not quite as plush as I was expecting. But the combination of these bars, the seat, and the footbed position where you've got a nice angle to your leg, it's not too hunched up, mean that you can do tons of miles on this and still feel fresh at the end of it. Also, whilst I'm here, I just want to kind of dispel a myth, or a bit of a myth, or a bit of a negative that I see people throw up about the Hondas, the Africa Twin mainly, is the startup time on this screen and how it tends to be slow. And I saw a guy doing a review saying that, I'll tell you what we'll do, let's just turn it off. What he was saying was that it's such a pain, put the ignition on, the screen takes its while to boot up, it is pretty slow. I'm sitting here still waiting, maybe I'll put a timer on the screen for this. Still waiting for it to go. Yeah, I know I'm responsible. And then we've got an OK button that you press, and there we go, we're ready to go. Start the engine and off you go. Now, I've seen this video, but having been riding these bikes for a while, that doesn't have to be the case. What you can do, switch the ignition on, hit the start key, put it in drive and go. You can just leave the screen to do what it needs to do. Okay, you've got no display on there for the time being, but it doesn't, you don't have to sit there and wait for it to boot up. Yeah, we've now got it saying it's okay. Hit the enter button on there and we're in. We've got pretty plush suspension. The Showa 43mm upside down forks, separate function forks up the front, got some adjustability, but it's fairly basic. You can just put preload in to the front, but that's all you can do, and you've got a hydraulic preload adjuster for the rear as well, so it's relatively basic in that sense, no electronic adjustment or anything, but it does a good job. It's been set up well. I've had no issues with the suspension at all. It's not too bumpy or crashy. I think they've got a good mix, soft enough to be comfortable, taut enough if you want to kind of push it on a little bit. And you can push it on a bit as well. This bike, despite only having just over 100 horsepower, as I found with the Africa Twin, is surprisingly quick, and it does hustle along nicely. Yeah, now I'm a massive fan of the Africa Twin motor, and to have it in here is good. It still sounds nice. It's not as it hasn't got the bark that the Africa Twin has. It's a little bit softer and a little bit quieter. You don't get as much of a brap on the downshift blips on the DCT box, but it's a nice responsive engine, smooth, good power when you feed it in, nothing too aggressive. The big difference, of course, is in the lower suspension. We've only got 150mm of travel on this bike, and the bigger difference obviously is that this has got a 17-inch front wheel as opposed to the 21 of the Africa Twin. Now, I thought the Africa Twin was a fantastic handling bike for a big adventure bike, and if you'd considered one of those as a kind of touring bike, then yeah, that's a good choice. But if you're not going to venture any further off-road than a gravel car park, then the NT1100 is a better road bike. There's your Metzeler Road Tech tyres. I've been pretty impressed with those, nice and grippy. Not had a chance to ride them in very wet weather yet, but we'll see how that goes. 150, 160, 70 horsepower is great, but the reality is on the road you don't really need it, and this bike will pick up. So 5th gear, 50 miles an hour, crack it open. Sport 2 drops me down to 3rd. It's a bike that I must admit you do really enjoy pushing through the twisties. I've been averaging about 48 miles to the gallon since I've had this, 48.6, and I must admit I've not been riding it particularly carefully. That's just ticked up to 49.1 from the trip reset, which was 124.5 miles ago, so that's not too bad. And given this has got a 20-litre tank, that's going to give you a good range, well over 200 miles. You've got decent weather protection, not just from the screen, but this sort of wide front that is very reminiscent of the XADV. In fact, it uses XADV headlights in it. My knees are tucked in quite nicely. I've got this little panel with a lip on that deflects the air around, so if you grip in the tank with your knees, you don't feel any of the air on it, and equally you don't get the rain on it if you're riding in the wet. So a good amount of protection. Weight gets talked about a lot with the bikes, and I can't remember the weight off the top of my head, so I'll put that on the screen. And as well as just being able to move it around relatively easily when you're off the bike, slow speed manoeuvring is also very good. We've got an 820mm seat height. The finish is typical Honda, as you'd expect. Everything seems to be done particularly nicely. There's one niggly point. I probably won't win any friends from Honda for pointing it out, but there's a little bit of exposed wiring down there that you can possibly just see. It might be that that will just tuck up, it might have just fallen down. That might just be a problem with this bike as opposed to the bike in general, but it's just a niggly little thing. But other than that, fit and finish, as you'd expect, is really good. Yeah, those gear changes are just so slick, you hardly feel them. Now, I don't take pillion passengers, to be fair, so it's something I never really include in my videos, and I don't think many other people tend to do that. Maybe that's something I should look at, but I think the pillion passengers are well set up on here. The seat behind me looks nice and plush and big and wide. There's loads of hand grips on there. Good feel on those brakes. If I compare it to something like the Suzuki S1000 GT, which are a bit more wooden, there's certainly better feel in these brakes. The others are just as effective, but you've got that little bit more feel with them. The rear brake is particularly effective. Oh, that's a nice house. Overall, what are my thoughts on the bike? And I think Honda have pretty much hit the mark with it in terms of doing what it needs to do. As a touring bike, it's got the toys on it, so you've got the centre stand, the heated grips, you've got the luggage that comes as standard. The DCT I think is a fantastic option. It's comfortable, it's quick, and it looks pretty good too. But there are a few niggles. The screen is one, not the actual functionality of the screen. That works really well. It's just the adjustment of the screen, which is a little bit of a negative. Again, another negative for me are those always on orange DRLs. I think that's maybe that's just me. So I think at the price it comes in at, considering the kit that you've got on board, you've got a well-proven engine in that 1084cc parallel twin. So if you are looking for a tourer, then I'd definitely recommend going and having a ride on these. As I say, there are a few negatives, but they don't, for me, outweigh the positives. But it's definitely a good bike. So whilst I'm sat here at another set of traffic lights, I might as well close out. So thank you for watching this. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've got any questions, then you know where to leave those in the comment section down below. If you like the video, hitting the like button is great. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then I would be eternally grateful for you to do that as well. I've also got a Patreon account. I don't really bang on about it very much, but if my videos have been of help to you and you'd like to support the growth of the channel, I am potentially looking at doing this, maybe if not completely full-time, but spending much more time on it to be able to get much more content out. Then any patrons are going to help that out. And then all that leaves me to say is until next time, thanks for watching, take care, ride safe, and I'll see you soon. Bye.